We're gonna bring Gina Rada up, and she is going to talk about ADUs and recent energy code clarifications for ADUs.
My struggle was to get this to all fit in an hour. So my solution is I'm going to talk fast. So I'm here representing Energy Code ACE today. I'm hoping all of you have heard of us because a lot like BayRen, you paid for us already through your utility bill. Everything is free, available through our website. That's our main portal to get to our many resources. We have tools. Reference ACE is one of my favorite tools. We have training. We have full day training. We have online training. I do a series of webinars that's every other month. And we have resources where we have one small topic. You guys are seeing an example of a resource that was put together for my webinar series called the Coding Talks. So we try and always keep the conversation going. So the content I have today was based on that particular webinar, and but condensing it from 2 hours to 1. I really want to explore how and you always have to, sorry people who are watching online, but it's clarification from the Energy Commission. Yeah, it's not a change, it's a clarification on how we look at ADUs that are converting existing structures. Examples of different types of ADUs, so we get to continue the discussion Ada started with the different types and how they may be affected by the Energy Code. How many people here model energy compliance? Then I'm going to go through that particular section so lightning fast, it's not even going to be funny. I didn't know how much I should really cover on top of that. And then impact of construction. This is always what my clients ask me. I am an energy consultant. One of our main types of construction we do in our office is ADUs. We do about probably 4 to 5 a week. And I have to tell you, there's a lot of barriers in terms of what does the Energy Code really want? Really? Really? And then how am I going to do that with, I've got this small space. And I love the question of the barriers and why homeowners aren't doing more of these. We have found, we have been in business, Gable Energy has been around for 36 years now. And in our experience, the best way to get divorced is to build a home together. It's very stressful. It's usually not what you expect it to be. And your contractor makes all the difference in the world with your experience. And right now, our contractors are very busy. There is so much construction going on. So trying to find the right fit can be that much more difficult. So code. Now we get to talk code. Everyone's favorite part. So our current code is the 2016 code. And we have another one coming up very soon called the 2019 code that goes into place January 1st of 2020. How many of you want to give you spoiler alerts of how ADUs are going to change for the next code cycle? Raise your hand. Okay, so what I do is I go spoiler alert because I want you to make sure you understand current code versus next code. So reference ACE, it is really my favorite tool ever. I am looking things up in the code constantly. I think I have them memorized, but I always prove myself wrong. This has the code language, the manuals, the appendices, everything the Energy Commission provides to support the standards. Everything is searchable, hyperlinked. You can use it on your phone. Yes, I do have it on my phone. I am that kind of nerd. What is an ADU? I found this particular resource by, I'm blinking with organization, California Department of Planning and Community Development. I thought it was one of the best resources I was able to get my hands on explaining what is an accessory dwelling unit and how the laws have changed with the series of Senate and Assembly bills that Ada discussed, how it affects what we're looking at. And it does clearly state that each city or county or authority having jurisdiction kind of has to come up with their own formula of how they're going to go about looking at ADUs. So don't always think what you think you know is going to apply to the city next door. You have to do your research city by city, county by county, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So I, of course, decided to look for what cities have put out there. Do we have someone here from the city of San Francisco? This is the most amazing resource to support how to build and what the impacts are and what the projected costs are for building ADUs in San Francisco. It was one of the best I have seen, and I think everyone who's building anywhere should look at it because it had beautiful descriptions of all the different types of ADUs, junior ADUs, how it works with multifamily. Such an amazing resource. So thank you so much, City of San Francisco. This was gorgeous. I really liked the City of LA's also. They were a lot more graphic, a lot more simplistic in their explanation of how ADUs work in their particular city. And I, of course, can't ever ignore City of Berkeley because they're my backyard. They have a great flow chart. I liked how they talked about this particular conversation as a flow chart of what do I need to figure out first, second, third, and how will it apply to my construction permit process. So there's lots of great information out there. So the Energy Commission has a quarterly newsletter that they call the Blueprint. Who here has heard of the Blueprint? Raise your hand. Okay, all of you should. All of you, all of you, all of you. This is how the Energy Commission communicates us throughout a code cycle and lets us know about clarifications. This is how we find out that things might look a little bit differently than what we thought they looked like. So they're available through the Energy Commission. I'm going to show you how to get to it at some point. I can't remember where I put that slide. And I asked the Energy Commission to give me a statement on why and how this clarification came out. Chris Olvera is one of my favorite people over there, and he's like, this was their statement. The construction of ADUs has just grown, and the fact that the energy code and how we were looking at it can be very restrictive to how we look at ADUs and how that constructability can be. And taking this on as a, hey, what's the best way to look at this in terms of the energy code? They came up with this clarification. And it's really, honestly, it blew me away. When this blueprint came out, they say they time it, how quickly they'll get a phone call from Gina after a blueprint comes out. This was a 30-second time lapse between the email that came out and Gina's phone call to the Energy Commission going, what? Really? Oh. So I immediately, I think within 25 days, we did our webinar on ADUs because it was such a big thing. So per the Energy Commission, there are 4 different types of ADUs. So we're going to walk through those relatively quickly. An attached, converted, unconditioned space to an ADU. So there's handouts, and the very first page of your handout supports this particular type of ADU conversion. So this is a unconditioned space that already exists that's attached to the single family home. So this most likely is usually a garage. That's what usually people visualize. We have very few basements in the Bay Area. I do actually have one of the few houses that have a basement. I got the price to convert my basement to an ADU because they have to dig down $100,000 just to dig down. Yeah, it's not going to be an ADU. So we do have a lot of clients, and they were very, we are blessed with our clients, and they gave us the permission to show you examples of the many ADUs that we have worked on in our office as it applies to these different types of ADU conversions. So this was one where it was a separate building on a single family home property, but it was an existing ADU, and they had a storage space. So they're converting that storage space into an ADU. And this is probably would be considered maybe a junior ADU. I got to tell you, the Energy Code does not differentiate between an ADU and a junior ADU. All the code requirements under Title 24 Part 6 apply exactly the same. So what is it that we need to be cognizant of? Before this clarification, that was considered an addition. And as an addition, would have to meet all of the Energy Code requirements of new construction as an addition. That space didn't exist before as conditioned space, so it has to meet current code in terms of the building features. What I got to tell you, does anyone know what we're doing in California in terms of energy efficiency? If any group should say, oh, yes, Gina, it should all be you. we have some very aggressive goals in California, and every single time I talk to a homeowner, they are blown away by what the Energy Commission, the Energy Code expects of their building type. They're like, what? But my house I'm in now doesn't even have any insulation at all, and you want me to build this? It's always a fun conversation. So the clarification says that existing unconditioned space that's attached to legally permitted, that's another fun conversation, legally permitted conditioned space is considered altered. So now we don't have to consider those walls new. They're what we call extended. Okay, and that's, I hate that they call it, I think it should be converted, should be the word we use, but they're what we define as extended. That roof now can meet all of the exceptions and flexibility associated with additions because it's not considered a brand new building. So let's go through what some of that is. So when we look at additions, we have two categories basically. 700 square feet or less of conditioned floor area, greater than 700 square feet. 700 square feet or less, there's a lot of leniency under the Energy Code regarding how we look at how that building needs to be insulated. If I have an addition 700 square feet or less, I only have to worry about R22 at the roof. That's a pretty big deal because if I have an addition over 700 square feet, I have to have a high performance attic, and we'll look at that next with our next type of ADU. So this is just R22, insulation could be blown in, it could be batt, it could be spray. I don't care what you're going to use. It has to be in full contact with that ceiling unless you're going to do some sort of hybrid type of attic space. And it's pretty simple to do. This is the least of everything. I don't have to worry about a radiant barrier until that ADU is over 700 square feet. I might have to think about a cool roofing product though, if that ADU exceeds 300 square feet. I have begged the Energy Commission to please make all the numbers line up. And does anyone know why all these numbers don't line up and they don't make this easier? Cost effectiveness. Everything under the Energy Code, every code feature has to show cost effectiveness that is going to pay for itself over the lifetime of that building feature. So this is where we have these weird little rules about 700 square feet or less, R22. Above that, now you've opened up the door, you have more flexibility in terms of cost effectiveness to integrate a high performance attic. That's what they figured out with the cool roof at 300 and with that radiant barrier at 700. So the walls. Walls are those existing walls are now what we call extended walls. So what I've got here is we show this, these are the walls associated with that existing conditioned space, and that wall that is there already associated with the unconditioned space is now considered extended, even if it's not extended. Isn't that fun? This was a great clarification. So, but what it means is it gets all the leniency associated with extended walls. It was their way to find something that was in the code that made sense and allowed to alleviate cost associated with ADU conversions. That made sense. So this particular ADU, can you see how we have existing walls that now are going to be converted into conditioned space? So extended walls get the exception of if it's a 2x4 framed wall, I have to fill the wall cavity with a condensed batt of R15. A little bit more expensive than R13. It's not always easily available. Sometimes we have to tell people order it way ahead of time because this is a relatively unique insulation in this day and age. But I have an R15 insulation, you're done. If it's a 2x6 framed wall, use R19, you're done. Spoiler alert. Our 2019 code, that 2x6 will go to R21. Not a big change. Same thing of calling this an extended wall stays exactly the same. The stuff for the roof, oops, that stays exactly the same. So not a lot of changes going on here for the next code cycle. Fenestration, windows, glass doors, skylights. It's all about size of addition. So if I have an ADU that's 400 square feet or less, I get up to 75 square feet of fenestration to use wherever I want, depending upon your climate zone. If you're in a climate zone that is not climate zone 2, that's climate zone 2 for 6 through 16. So here we're in climate zone 3 today. We don't even have to worry about west-facing restrictions if we're in climate zones 1, 3, and what number am I missing? 5. Otherwise, we do have to think about how is the building oriented, how is the sun going down when usually they're coming home from work and there's a lot of sun on those windows and they're using a lot more air conditioning. We're fogged in when it's hot outside. We actually have shown we use more heating in the summertime than we use air conditioning. So you get a lot more leniency in how much window area you get, because a brand new home, it's 20% of the conditioned floor area. For this smaller size, it's 30%. It's kind of nice. It gets a little bit bigger, between 400 and 700 square feet. It's not 20%, it's 25%. We're still getting a little bit more allowance, understanding we need to get that natural light into the space, and we need egress, and we need ventilation. But the minute it's over 700 square feet, now we're looking at that 20%. We do have some flexibility west facing if you're in one of those climate zones. The minute we're over 1,000, there's no flexibility at all throughout anything we're talking about. Any ADU over 1,000 square feet is looked at without any exceptions. So HVAC, indoor air quality, and domestic hot water. So I'm going to kind of spread my love of this topic as we move along. I am a plumbing designer as my beginning of my trade. So whenever we talk about this, I'm like, this is the most important part of the home. So the energy code dictates indoor air quality the minute we have an addition, which is now a converted ADU, exceeding 1,000 square feet. But is that really what we want? Shouldn't each dwelling unit get its own indoor air quality ventilation system? So we highly recommend that each dwelling unit, I don't care how big it is, has its own indoor air quality ventilation, but the energy code cannot dictate you do it until that ADU conversion exceeds 1,000 square feet. One thing you do need to know, though, is that the mechanical code will not allow dwelling units to share return air. So if you have a standard split HVAC system with ducting running all around your attic, and you want to tap into that for your ADU for those 2 bedrooms, you might want to convert into an ADU. You can't, because you're sharing return air. We don't want to share what you might be doing in your personal space with my personal space. We're finding, I'm not sure all of you have heard the horror stories with what's going on sometimes with apartments where I've got smokers on one end and people have asthma on the other, and there's leakage. That's just what's happening. Return air just means we are really, truly sharing the air. I'm smelling everything you're doing. I'm breathing everything you're doing. So we have to think about putting in HVAC systems that don't share return air. This could be a ductless system. This could be a wall heater. I mean, we're not talking expensive technology. It could be a hydronic radiant system. There are different ways of doing it that are definitely affordable, but tapping into an existing ducted system is not going to be an option. So what does the CF1R say? This is what I was going to speed through since you guys don't do it. The Energy Commission has a beautiful form just supporting additions, and that is not facetious. It actually really is a beautiful form. They really walk you through what's your size of your addition. Remember, we had all these weird rules depending upon size of addition? Well, the form automatically will populate those window area allowances and so forth based on your size category. So these are things that I just really love about the form. There's a lot of drop-down menus. There's a lot of interaction. There is, to me, this is one of the best types of forms we've seen. I've been doing this since 1991, so a very long time. It's one of the best forms we've seen in really understanding how the energy code applies. Typically, we're not going to have HERS measures associated with these small additions because I really want to get away from ducted systems. The minute I have a ducted system, I will have HERS measures. If I don't have ducted systems and I don't have an ADU that exceeds 1,000 square feet, I typically won't have any HERS measures. And there's a lot of complexity associated with registering documents and having third-party inspection when we have HERS measures. Whew. Questions on converting an existing space that's attached to an existing home before I move on to the next one? Got it down? Okay, on to the next one. I'm attaching to my existing home, but I'm building it from scratch. That's the second page of your handout. So this could be I had nothing there before, but I've got the area in my yard to extend out and put conditioned floor area where it never existed before, and there was no structure there at all. This particular project, to me, it seems better now that they filled that gapping corner and they're adding an ADU to a space where they never had anything before. They're having less yard to put in a brand new ADU. So these are brand new walls. There were no existing walls, brand new floors, brand new roof. Everything is brand new, but it's attached to the existing home. This looks and feels just like an addition. So the clarification is this is an addition, and all of the allowances for additions based on size and extended walls apply to this same type of construction, even though it's its very own dwelling unit. It is an addition to the existing home. So roof, if I had an addition that's over 700 square feet, remember R22 isn't my exception anymore. So let's look at what it would look like, what I'd have to think about the minute my ADU is over 700 square feet. I have 3 different high performance attic requirements. So we're going to go through these throughout our various types of ADUs. So option A is I have insulation at or above the roof deck. Oh? Anyone seen that in real life? I never have. This is an elusive beast called option A. Spoiler alert, it's going away in the next code cycle because it's an elusive beast and no one is doing this. Now, building science wise, and there's a whole new decoding talk I have on that in building science, this is the best. But roofers are typically then would be in charge of the insulation and they will not take on that liability. So that's why we typically don't see it. And I also have that insulation we're used to seeing on the ceiling there at the bottom of the attic. And it has to be a vented attic. A lot of times we're finding people are like, oh, well, this is an unvented attic that you're showing me. No, this is a vented attic, lots of baffles, really thinking carefully through ventilation. Why is it, do you think, that the Energy Commission is adding all this insulation around this pocket called the attic? What's in the attic? What makes it so important? What do we put up there? Not your Christmas ornaments. What do we put in the attic? Our ducks. So here those ducks are sitting there waiting patiently for you to get home from work. And it was 110 degrees out that day. And you get home and your home is a beautiful 85 degrees, but is that cool enough for you? So you're going to turn on your AC, and what is being pushed into your home right now? About 140 degree air that's been sitting there in those ducts that's up in that attic that's getting very hot. So it's all about reducing the air that's sitting in ducts for when you turn on that AC right when it's the biggest load of the system in California on a hot day when everyone gets home and turns on their air conditioning, starts their wash, does dinner, and turns on all their lights because they have to keep all of their curtains closed. We all use electricity so well in our homes. So remember cost effectiveness? You'll notice that I have 16 columns along here. We have 16 climate zones in California, and this was not found to be cost effective, hence pay for itself in all climate zones. Which climate zones do not ever have to think about a high performance attic? Climate zone 1, they never see the sun, so really, come on. Climate zone 2, that's Sonoma, and climate zone 3 here in the Bay Area. So be cognizant of the fact that some of these requirements might not apply to you, but we find almost all the projects we do in the Bay Area, we put in a high performance attic for these small ADUs because it gives them leniency for their walls, which we usually have a lot more difficulty in meeting the energy code requirements for walls than it is to do this little teeny 600 square foot new attic space for an ADU. This is a lot more cost effective for those smaller type of applications. So radiant barrier is going to be required depending on climate zone. Climate zone 1, 16 don't have radiant barrier requirements. And again, that upper roof insulation is dependent upon your climate zone. So don't be thinking that this applies everywhere. Be cognizant of where the project is. Walls. Now I have extended walls and I have new walls. You might think they're all new walls, but I, as your energy consultant, am immediately going to be thinking, is it an extended wall or is it a new wall? Because remember, extended walls 2x4 are 15, 2x6 are 19. New walls, now we're talking 2x6 with R21 insulation and an extra 1 inch of rigid insulation outside the framing. That's what we're talking about if it's a new wall. What's that small little floor plate that we have got going on here, and how close are we to the property line? So this is what usually becomes the biggest discussion with all of our clients. So here is our project, and I've labeled some walls here, A, B, C, or D. I'd like you to tell me which letters are extended walls. C is an interior wall now. It's now conditioned space on one side, conditioned space on the other. So that is an interior wall. B and D, excellent. So B and D are what we call extended walls because they're extending the plane of the existing walls that were there already associated with conditioned space, meaning all the other walls that aren't extending from that plane are new walls. So here, potentially, if we do this, a simplistic method, I have two different types of walls for this very small ADU. Extended 2x4 with R15, turn the corner 2x6 with R21 and 1 inch of rigid. Everyone loves to construct that, right? Has anyone ever seen that in reality? No. Two things happen. They either trade it away or their contractor does what he wants anyway, and potentially final inspection is going to go horribly wrong because the walls do not match up to the promise of the energy compliance report. So new walls, again, the Energy Commission is looking at wrapping the building, embracing the building with rigid insulation. It is really helping a lot with the heat transfer associated with framing, but honestly, the biggest thing it's doing is it is preventing infiltration. Because I want to add, do any of you insulate? Have you ever insulated your own home? Yeah, I hope all of you should do it once to understand the torture those people have to go through. My kids know it too, because they get to do the little spots. But it has to be done beautifully. So they have, insulation doesn't work if it's compressed. It is not fully fluffed. Tell everyone, fluff. There's another reason for a crochet hook in your life. That rigid insulation is preventing all of that improper installation and having a really nice high performing wall. This is why it's called a high performance wall, because of that rigid insulation. What might be another way for me to get this U factor of 0.051? Who here has built a home or designed a home with rigid insulation on the walls? Yay! Get the details from them, honestly. Detailing is the hardest part about that. What have the rest of you been doing? I have to say most people are still doing a 2x6 wall with R19 and taking a huge penalty in their energy calculations for that flexibility. Or they're doing a 2x4 with R13 and praying the building inspector doesn't notice. Or what they'll do is they'll do a spray insulation within that cavity that has a higher R value. It's more condensed. That can be with a open cell, closed cell, then we start getting kind of other scary things happening. When we talk about closed cell, in fact, the way that spray insulation is applied has that high performance wall, because I won't have all the gaps and compression and this and that associated with that insulation. So there are some nice ways of doing this. Oops, I gave the answer away. Which of these walls is considered new? So that's the minute we turned the corner, and now those walls would be new and have to meet a 0.051 U factor requirement versus the other extended walls, of which I could have a 2x4 or 2x6 without any rigid insulation. Fenestration. I had an existing space. I should have put this in the other section, so this is a little inappropriate here. I did it late at night on Sunday, so oops, sorry. So I am converting an existing space to conditioned space, to an ADU. And I've got a beautiful, historic, single pane metal window. And the homeowner does not want to change it. It's a perfectly good window. Will that work? No, because that fenestration is what we call new fenestration now, because it's associated with newly conditioned space and has to meet all of the energy code requirements for windows. And I got to tell you, 50% of the energy use of a space is because of fenestration. We want to really spend a lot of time thinking about the best product. And I tell my clients, this is going to be your one item that's going to cost the most of your entire project. Yes. Yes, so there is an exception for historic, qualified, registered historic buildings, having exceptions for the facade being able to maintain the look of that historic status. I find a lot of times, though, I have to have the conversation, historic doesn't mean old. Historic means it's a registered building versus it's old. And when I have, now this is new construction, I'm going to add on to my historic home. Do I get the same exception for historic exceptions for this addition to an existing historic building? No. So just because you might need to, even planning might say you have to make it look exactly like the existing building. The energy code does not give you that flexibility because it's new construction. And you have to be very creative in ways to get it to blend well. Okay. When we talk about windows, we talk about how much window, we already had that discussion, how much window do I have facing which direction? But I also want to talk about the performance of that fenestration product. And we talk in terms of SHGC and U factor. So solar heat gain coefficient is the ability for that product to prevent solar heat gain when the sun is hitting those windows. U factor is the ability of that product to transfer heat from one side to the other. This could be it's cold outside, it's hot inside, it's cold inside, it's hot outside. How is that heat transferring back and forth and has nothing to do with the sun? And these numbers are actually pretty aggressive. We have a U factor of 0.32. This represents a non-metal or thermally broken, dual-paned, low E triple, argon-filled product. We have an SHGC of 0.25. This represents a low E triple. When I say low E triple, I don't mean triple paned. I'm saying there's 3 coatings of low emissivity film or that coating associated with the product. The main component to low E is which element? What is the major element behind low E? Silver. So we're talking 3 coatings of silver to meet this 0.25 SHGC requirement. I always have that conversation with my homeowners. This is just like you just put 3 amazing sterling silver rings on your finger. Was 1 cheaper or was 3 cheaper? So you are paying for the privilege. So, but it really honestly pays for itself. The first thing I've done with every house I've ever owned is upgrade the windows. And I spend as much money as I possibly have stealing from my kids' piggy bank and begging money from my parents at the same time, because it's the one thing that can make such a difference to a home. So HVAC, indoor air quality, domestic hot water, we already talked about this a little bit. I don't have to worry about providing its own indoor air quality ventilation system until that ADU that's now an addition exceeds 1,000 square feet, though we strongly, strongly, strongly recommend it be done anyway. Spoiler alert. Next code cycle, they cleaned this up. And now next code cycle, the 2019 code cycle, any new dwelling unit, I don't care how big it is, will have to have its own indoor air quality system. So what does the calculation say? We're not even really going to talk about this because you guys don't look at these. You really should at some point in your lifetime because it tells you what's going on. So I was also asked to talk about when an ADU is made out of a space that's already there. It's a couple of bedrooms, and this is that discussion Ada had. I'm adding a little, I added a cooking device, I added a door to the outside. When is it a junior ADU? Well, how does the energy code look at when you're carving out of your existing home that you want to turn it into an ADU? So my example here is that, hey, we don't really use that family area, that family room. Everyone live in your rooms. We're going to turn that into an ADU. Your kids wanted to be there anyway. They don't want to be out in the living room. Who else has teenagers? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So what has to happen to the roof? What do I have to do to upgrade the roof from the energy code because I'm converting existing conditioned space to an ADU? Nothing. It's already conditioned space. Walls, what do you have to do to the walls because you're converting existing conditioned habitable space to an ADU? There's a pattern here. Nothing. Excellent. What do you have to do for fenestration? Nothing. Floor, nothing. Oof. HVAC. There's no pattern going on here. What do you have to think about now for HVAC? You can't share the return air. So this is really honestly for the energy code going to be your most expensive item because I would honestly be thinking about putting a mini ductless split system in here, separating out putting in their own indoor air quality ventilation system. Hey, if I'm really short on funds, I might put in just a wall furnace. It all depends on where I want to go. What do you have to do for domestic hot water? I'm going to tap into the water heater that's already serving the home. Nothing. That's totally allowed. You can share hot water with others. Please do. Any questions on adding on to a home and building from scratch? I love it. That's either you're bored silly or I have done this really well. Okay, detached. And I find in our experience, detached is the more popular ADU choice in the Bay Area. So I am converting an existing space, let's say a 2-car separate garage, to a new conditioned ADU space. This could be a pool shed. This could be a, we've seen all sorts of, this could be a illegal unit. It's an existing space. It was never legally made conditioned, but it is there. So this is where I put the category of trying to get an illegal unit to be legal. And this is the one that blew me away when I read and interpreted the clarification. So previously, this was conditioned space for the very first time, and it had to meet the energy code for new construction in its entirety. That can be difficult when you've got this existing structure. You're like, you mean I have to rip those walls down and everything down because they're not going to be able to be a high performance wall or a high performance attic? Well, then what's the point? All of a sudden now the cost to do this ADU is way beyond what they thought. They thought they can just convert a building that's already there and it's going to pretty much look the same but cuter. Everyone knows it's going to look cuter. So before, this was not an addition because I was not extending from the existing home. This is a completely separate dwelling unit in the backyard. It would have to be treated like a brand new home, which is pretty hard. With this clarification, this is now an addition. Nice. Super nice. Let's remind ourselves what we get with an addition. So for that roof, remember, if it's less than 700 square feet, R22 at the roof, walk away, call it done. If it's over 700 square feet, I have to think high performance attic. So we already looked at option A. Let's look at option B. Option B is I have insulation below the roof deck. So it's either wired or sprayed, or there's some beautiful blown-in products out there these days that you staple to your trusses, and they come in. It looks like pantyhose, and they come in and they blow the insulation in there, and it's pretty easy, and it's not that expensive. I also have the insulation at the ceiling, and it must be ventilated. So I really have to have my architects think about how they're going to baffle and do upper ridge vents and This is the most popular type of high performance attic. Spoiler alert. This is going to stay for the 2019 code cycle. The above roof deck insulation right now is an R13. It's going to move to R19. That's the difference between this code cycle and next code cycle. So again, in climate zones 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, it's so mild, high performance attics are not required. But again, this is the one we use so often for ADUs in the Bay Area because it's an extra credit now that I can use for leniency, typically towards the walls. So, extended walls. All of those existing walls that are there already are extended walls. 2x4 R15, 2x6 R19, next code cycle R21. Now, let's say it just wasn't big enough. I'm converting a shed. So I needed to pop out, and I always like to call this is now called an addition to an addition. And I'm going to add some new construction to make it bigger. Now, if I think about that the converted shed, all those walls are considered extended because it's converted existing structure. I just kind of gave that away. Which of these walls are considered extended? A, B, C, and or D? D, B, and C. What is A? That is considered a new wall. So in this configuration, that wall would have to meet that U factor of 0.051, but those other three walls don't. That's, again, a lot of people trade away the ability to have that wall A match the rest of the walls. And a great way to do it is start thinking about a high-performance attic would be a nice option for this particular project. And that's exactly how we got it done. Opinion? You know I've got opinions.
What do you think of that A wall? Does it matter, or is it just a kind of waste of extra effort in the building?
If I were going to do something to meet the U factor 0.051, would I want to do it for just one wall? No. If that's my west or north wall, it probably might have some value because that's my coldest wall and my hottest wall. But this is such a small space, I'd want everything to match. And I would want to spread the love a little bit maybe and improve that 2x4 R15 wall and have it then match that fourth wall if I was just looking at walls. So fenestration, let's talk about what type of products. So we know the value, how good it has to perform. We already know how much we can have. But now we have to talk about how is it rated. So we have default windows. These are custom windows. These might be existing windows that I had already and I want to reuse. Those are default windows because they're not tested. So they have to use default values that represent the worst windows known to mankind. And those values are really hard. They're really, really, really hard because you have to take a penalty for those windows being nowhere near the performance of a tested product. We do have a nice little back door for up to 250 square feet of fenestration. And for these small units, that's a lot, right? That might be everything. And this is, you promise me you're going to use a very specific glazing product. I'm going to use Solarband 70 XL Clear. Ooh, because that meets all my center of glass values that I want nicely. And I'm going to promise to use either a vinyl frame or a wood frame. I'm going to do a frame that doesn't conduct heat well. I'm not going to do metal. Can't do this with metal. You can try, but it's not going to work very well. That promise gets you to a value that's very, very close to what you're required to do. So it's something that's associated with site built. This is windows built just for the configuration of that home. Architects love site built glazing because it's whatever they think up in their head. It's not what came out of a catalog. What they really want people to use is NFRC tested and labeled products. And for residential, this has to be an actual traditional physical test of each product size and type. So our small window manufacturer, there's a couple here in Emeryville that are amazing. They don't have a lot of their products tested through an NFRC lab. So I would have to go default, even though they're amazing windows, they haven't gone through the testing procedure. And the testing procedure costs money and it takes time. It's supposed to be that building departments are not supposed to accept anything unless they've shown in their calculation they're doing something worse than, unless that window has this label that says NFRC on it. So it sometimes can become a challenge if we want unique window configurations to be able to meet the fenestration requirements. Domestic hot water and indoor quality, HVAC. So what I wanted to talk about now is you're going to add a water heater just for that ADU. So here's this ADU free floating in the backyard. You can either one, trench out water piping and have it served by your water heater of your main house. It's not an option I would really recommend. Or you can add a second water heater to that property that's a single family home with no penalty. So if the existing home only has one water heater, you get to add a second water heater gift. It's a gift to you. It has to meet the prescriptive requirements for water heaters, which is a gas tankless water heater. And that can be an issue in terms of getting that gas piping back to that back unit. This is usually what causes the biggest heartache. Spoiler alert. Next code cycle, 2019 code cycle, opens the door for heat pump water heaters beautifully. And a heat pump water heater is a prescriptive water heater, not just a gas tankless water heater anymore. Now, I love that there's a whole class on heat pump water heaters. All of you who want to think about heat pump water heaters, please get some knowledge about what it means. There's no such thing as a tankless heat pump water heater. It has to have the tank. The technology is not, it may be available, but it doesn't meet the efficiency requirements that we have. And that's pretty big. The smallest heat pump water heater I know of is 50 gallons. They're typically 55 gallons. And we see how small these units are. Where are you going to put it? Because it has to be indoors. It can't just be stuck outside the building. So you really have to think about good design practice and where would you put it. So this doesn't take up room. You could put it up above in a closet, this and that. This doesn't have footprint impact in terms of usable space, but it has CO2 impact. If you do heat pump water heater, then you have footprint impact of where's it going to go in your conditioned floor area space. Yes. Ew, 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 ew. Electric water heaters. Do I have an opinion?
If you have solar on your house.
No. Solar is all about energy generation, and Title 24 Part 6 is the building code. What are you building in terms of efficiency into the home, not how are you generating energy, which is why it's crazy with 2019. Suddenly we're bringing in generation into the picture, but currently right now, generation is not part of the picture. And if this is considered an addition, you don't get to open up the door and take credit for a PV system at all. And electric resistance, let's think about when we all get home and we start doing our wash and cooking and this and that, right when we turned on our air conditioning unit, we have a huge load impact onto our electric grid, which is why electric resistance, it uses an awful lot of electricity to produce even one therm. It's just not a good method currently to use that energy source. I get it, you're off the grid, you're your PV, so forth, but if this is altered or addition, you don't get to open up the door to what am I generating on site. You do have some ability to think about it for a brand new structure though, and we'll talk about that next. Another question back here, Sarah. I either have to repeat your question in which I say it my way, or you have to wait for the microphone.
It was pretty exciting. Now the microphone suddenly hit it towards me. What about building a little structure right outside to enclose the heat pump water heater?
It depends on your manufacturer. Manufacturers have great guidelines on what of their product lines should be within a conditioned space, what of their product lines can be just protected. And so it really depends on the manufacturer. So you're going to want to shop for the heat pump water heater that will work best with your application. It's what makes it not so great is how a heat pump water heater works is it's capturing heat from the air and converting it into your heated water. And if typically if you have something outside or unconditioned, It's really, are you really going to have hot water on a really cold day? Probably not, or at least not much, and especially not efficiently. So it has to be thought through carefully.
There are some compromises given efficiency, but if you've got very small floor area you're working with, sounds like with some manufacturers, doing it outside and then enclosed.
That will, you'll have to see the 2019 code provides for a heat pump water heater that's in a garage or in the conditioned space. So there would have to be some interpretations about what could be considered a garage. Is a storage room really a garage? And that's where they were looking for a volume space, a wall against a conditioned space. But the energy code is going to say a heat pump water heater in a garage or a conditioned space up against a conditioned wall. Okay, what does the CF1R say? Who cares? So let's just go through that. Any more questions on I'm converting? Yes, I have a question here. City of San Francisco with the best ADU pamphlet known to mankind.
Extended walls, if they're irregularly framed, you have to reframe it.
If they're what?
If they're irregularly framed, they're not like 2x4s or 16 inches.
So I have an existing wall, but it's a really crappy existing wall. Can I reframe it? Yes. The energy code looks at if you're rebuilding an existing feature that's there, it's an alteration, it has all the exceptions of an alteration. It's only if that wall was never there before, is it considered a new wall. And just, you know, everything we're talking about in terms of these allowances for ADUs, guess what? There are also allowances for additions. So this conversation, if we want a bigger single family home, because, you know, 3,500 square feet wasn't big enough, all of these exceptions apply to additions to those homes too. Okay.
Sorry, Gina, just a couple questions on the GoToWebinar right over here.
Okay.
It's actually just one quick comment from Steve Mann on the webinar.
Hey, Steve.
Wants to mention that Sandin makes a 40-gallon heat pump water heater with an outdoor compressor.
So that is great. Just be cognizant of when we talk about next code cycle, about what the prescriptive criteria is for that second water heater. And what's nice, what he's saying is that the condenser is not attached on top of the water heater, it's separate. So you maybe can put that in a more tempered environment, but your tank is somewhere else. So it's just like a mini ductless split system where you have a unit out here, but the actual units are inside. It adds a nice flexibility to design choices.
And then the second question from Rebecca Mills, specific question. So she has a garage on a lower level, the rest of her house is on the upper level, and she'd like to convert the garage to an ADU. What is required for the ADU ceiling underneath the above bedroom floor?
Nothing. Because what is that? That is now a surface that's separating conditioned spaces, and the energy code does not have any requirements for walls, roofs, ceilings, floors, separating conditioned space from conditioned space. Would it make sense to insulate and really think about infiltration and think about sound? Yes. So there might be other code requirements. I am part 6. I am all part 6. So I don't like to speak too much of other code requirements just because I don't know them as well as I know part 6. We have a couple more questions over here.
That you will be required to probably put 2 layers of 5/8 sheetrock on that because of fire code.
So fire rating is definitely an issue. Again, sheetrock is not insulation. So again, the energy code wouldn't be looking at that wall being altered. But that 2 layers of chipboard does help with your performance of that particular product. So I always take advantage of 2 layers of 5/8 chipboard, energy related wise. Okay. So now the sad conversation, and I have 5 minutes to give you the sad conversation. Detached, brand new, it was never there before, ADU. What is this considered by the energy code? An addition or a brand new home? A brand new home. And it has to meet all the requirements of a brand new home. I don't care how small it is. I have so many clients, Gina, but it's only 400 square feet. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. And the energy code is really honestly developed to support a 2,400 square foot house. So this is where there is a lot of room for improvement on how the energy code, oops, I'm representing the IOUs. Someone else said that out loud and I nodded, okay? So this is where there could be a little bit maybe more leniency in play of what's the size of the home and how should the energy code apply to the size and the use. I mean, are they really going to use the same amount of electricity and gas of a 2,400 square foot home? Maybe not if it's built really, really well from the beginning, which is what the energy code wants. And that's what this last page is all about, is what has to happen for all those walls, that roof, the HVAC system, etc. So it's treated like a brand new home, as a brand new single family home. This is how much of the code looked at all these other ADUs we've talked about already. This is what applied. So now it's just only left for the last man standing is you're building from scratch. There are no considerations of how close you are to the lot line. So that is something that has to be thought about when we're designing these. Are you designing for a high performance wall? Really needs to be thought of. So there's no change to how we look at these ADUs that are from scratch. It's what we look at, what we call prescriptive package A, in which we have high performance attic. We looked at option A, we looked at option B for a high performance attic. We're about to look at option C. Cool roof, I don't care the size of the space. Cool roof is going to be required depending upon your climate zone. Radiant barrier is going to be required dependent upon your climate zone. Not if you're using option B though, that was that insulation below the roof deck, because you'd be covering up the radiant barrier. Covered up radiant barrier doesn't work the way we want exposed radiant barrier to work. Or you're going to use the performance approach to get flexibility for many of these options. Rarely is a brand new ADU ever done prescriptively because it's so restrictive. Everyone goes the performance approach. So option C, we talked about the whole point behind high performance attic was putting those ducts up in the attic. Ooh, how about we don't do that? So let's think about maybe a ductless system, putting the ducts within the conditioned space. A lot of things we can think of mechanically so that we can have a standard insulated roof like we're used to, insulation at the ceiling or at the bottom of the attic, a radiant barrier, and potentially a cool roof, and we're done. And if you want to do another layer of insulation, it's extra credit. So walls. We have that U factor, 0.051 for most our climate zones. So I've been saying over and over again, 2x6 wall with R21 and 1 inch of rigid. That's what the Energy Commission says is that standard wall. But there are other ways of doing it because we just have to meet the U factor. Doesn't it make sense for a small ADU to do a double wall? Yeah, never ever, but I have to put it out there. Staggered wall. Staggered wall is becoming very popular with our clients. There's a lot more labor behind putting that insulation in there, and this is a 2x6 plate with 2x4 framing, and I'm wrapping, not really wrapping, I'm carefully placing, fluffing, and using my crochet hook to put that insulation in among the framing. Would work quite well for spray insulation or spray or blown-in insulation is very popular with this type of wall. This is a nice way to keep your property line, but still achieve that high U factor. And we're not using that much more expensive product. SIPS wall. I'm from the 80s. You guys remember all those SIPS buildings from the 80s? Anyone here designing with SIPS? We're seeing more hybrid SIPs where maybe it's standard construction walls, but a SIP roof or SIP walls and a standard construction roof. There's a lot of stuff going out there. This meets these requirements beautifully. There's a small company out of Santa Rosa called Bamcor that's doing amazing things, that it's this type of wall that is pretty exciting. But this is what the Energy Commission is kind of looking at. We have a standard framed wall, and then we're attaching insulation to the outside, and then our finishing products are going on outside of that. Fenestration. Where does everyone want all their windows? Which orientation? North, south, east, west? West. Typically here, west is the beautiful view. It's where the water is. It's where the sunset is. Let's think about how bad that is. So you get home at 5:30, well, really 7:30, and there's no sun. But let's say you live closer to home, and you get home at 5:30. It's 110 degrees out. You turned on your AC. You pushed in all of that hot air into your house, and now you get to see the lovely sunset. And the sun is hitting your windows and bringing in all that solar gain the entire time you're awake and until you go to bed. And then you go, finally comfortable. So placement of windows, design of windows, doing anything to offset sun hitting those windows should be very much part of any design. And this is becoming more and more of an issue in the Bay Area. We have an exception to SHGC in Climate Zone 3, but City of Berkeley, how many more AC units are being installed in your buildings in Berkeley? It's happening more and more and more where people are adding AC to their homes, to their apartments, et cetera, because they're getting really hot. Because, yes, there is global warming and it's getting hotter. IOUs, yes, I did say that out loud. So we look at time-dependent value. What time are you using your energy in the day in terms of peak use conditions? Dependent upon where you are. Are you in the desert? Or are you in the Bay Area? Can you see how energy use would be different based on where you are? And what's the value of the energy you're using? Gosh dang it, I'm 2 minutes over. Electricity, gas, et cetera, is going to affect that. So that's why we have restrictions for brand new homes, including these small ADUs. 20% of your conditioned floor area, woohoo, don't use it all in one place. And a 5% of your conditioned floor area restriction for west facing, not in our climate zone, but the minute we go over the hill to Lafayette, Dublin, Pleasanton, et cetera, they would have these limitations. You don't want to bring the gas out there? Heat pump technology is something we can use now in a performance calculation, and honestly, we don't take any penalties for it. So even though prescriptively we're not allowed to do a heat pump water heater under current code, it works just fine in a performance calculation. PV. This is a brand new home, right? Well, we have PV allowances under this current code for extra credit. And what you're trading away is the ability to have to do a high performance wall or a high performance attic. Here in Climate Zone 3, we only have high performance wall requirements. So your PV credit is this big. Whereas you go over the hill to Lafayette, Dublin, Pleasanton, they have high performance attic and wall. Their PV credit is bigger. And this is all supposed to give the industry a code cycle to learn how to do high performance walls and attics. So it goes away in the next code cycle and becomes a prescriptive requirement to provide some sort of renewable, whether it be PV at the home, at the community, battery storage. There's even going to be some provisions of energy storage within your appliances. Hey, how about you store energy in your water heater? How about you store energy by the fact that you're going to program your appliances to only be used at off-peak conditions? So there's all sorts of things that are being looked at for the next code cycle. For me, it's so exciting to be an energy consultant. That's really quite fascinating. So don't be sad that's going away. It's a good thing. Who cares about this? Yay, we're done. I'm a little bit over, so I'll let you guys decide.
You are actually great. We
Okay.
have lots of time now for questions.
Woo.
We can have some good discussions.
Did I talk fast enough?
That was, yeah. With the microphones, we're going to take it easy. Okay, we've got a microphone already.
I had known that most residential use the performance method, but I thought with ADUs prescriptive was common. Is that
For
incorrect?
when it's an addition. So when I can use the prescriptive addition approach for those ADUs that are either converted space or attached to the existing home, it's beautiful. Because all those exceptions I talked about apply prescriptively.
But for new detached, performance,
Performance is the only way to go.
and will that continue to be true in the 2019 code?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a question about architects? What are they likely to get
Careful.
wrong? Like, what advice should cities do, or if we're trying to prepare some material to help architects, what would you tell them?
The biggest thing I see that's the issue is that the energy calculation does not speak to the design. We require our architects to understand when we said high performance wall what that meant and give us a detail that backs it up. A lot of other energy consultants who are cheaper and faster than me will just give you something that says building complies and has your address on it. Is that speaking to your design? And there's a lot of in between. And there's a lot better than, I have other energy consultants out there that they really want to make it a zero net energy home, and we're doing even more. But I would think the biggest thing that architects need to get on board is understanding their energy calculation and what it's saying about their design features, and then designing, detailing, and specifying to those products and design details. Let's wait till we have a microphone.
Seen any ADUs passing performance, detached ADUs passing performance and not using gas?
No. It just becomes such a barrier. Next code cycle, though.
So how does that mesh with the NE requirements coming if you can't do a natural gas? If you can't get rid of natural gas.
So this is not the Z&E code, that's the next code. Next code, they opened up the door. This code is still a little bit firmly locked with gas.
Are there any of the radiant floors electric that are efficient at all, or are they all?
Electric resistance uses a lot of electricity for a therm, and now you're trying to have it push through a flooring product. Not my favorite thing. They can be used nicely as a supplemental system, and I think that's a beautiful way of using them. As a primary system, I shudder.
So there's a way to do that in the calculation?
Yes. You are allowed up to a certain wattage, and I don't have the number memorized. This is what I would look up in reference ACE. You have a certain number of watts you're allowed to use as electric resistance secondary supplemental system, as long as it's on a 30-minute timer.
And if you wanted to do in an ADU a second hot water heater tankless, there's no real good way to do that.
Tankless electric?
Not just thinking in terms of a lot of times people, because of spacing and hot water heaters, they don't want to do a research, so they want to do a separate one. But
as long as it's not the primary, there ADUs I have not played around with, but a standard 2,400 square foot home. And let's say I have the primary water heater being a gas tankless system, but I have a small point of use electric resistance serving 1/2 bath somewhere where it just would be cost prohibitive to bring hot water piping. I can get that to work a lot of times because the primary water heating source is that gas water heating source. The secondary, and only for a small load, is that point of use electric water heater.
yeah, I'm talking more in terms of actual secondary backup gas in different locations. One for the kitchen, one for the bathroom. Only, 700 square foot ADU, but they're on opposite sides of the building.
If that was a design goal that you had, we would be probably having to do a lot of other Herculean efforts with other features of the building to give you that flexibility.
Research system is the way to go then.
Definitely. Research system with the right controls.
Questions? We've still got a little bit of time.
I can't believe I ended early. I thought for sure that wasn't going to happen. My biggest comment usually is, wow, you made the energy code fun.
Wait, it wasn't fun already?
Yeah.
So for a smaller unit, say 260, 300 square foot with R values along ceiling, roof, and one wall, let's say like 40, could you potentially get away with electric tank?
No.
Or no HVAC?
No HVAC. Well, it's the building code that requires some sort of heating system that maintains 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 feet above the floor, 3 feet in from the exterior wall, not the energy code. So I don't think no HVAC is going to be an option. Electric resistance water heating, honestly, I mean, unless we have PV, if you give me PV for that little teeny unit and you don't have, and the PV is not already on that existing home, I might be able to get to do it. That's where PV can help if it's a brand new ADU from scratch.
Curious about a brand new ADU detached where running gas is an option.
Right now, that's just one of the challenges of the energy code and that type of construction of which is being alleviated in the next code cycle. That's a big win for all of cities who are wanting to reduce their CO2 footprint and the ability to do these type of buildings in a more cost-effective manner.
So if you were building an ADU, what kind would you build?
Well, I have this shed in my backyard because I already researched the basement and that's out. But the shed, and I talked to my daughter's 22. She still lives at home. She will probably live at home the rest of her life. And I'm hoping to maybe convert it for it to be a home for her.
Okay, and then what is one thing that you wish everyone knew about when they're embarking on the journey of building an ADU?
Oh, you guys asked me this in the call. It's going to cost a heck of a lot more than you think. And it's going to take a lot more time. Do you know what? Okay, how many of you are architects or contractors in the room? And that first number they give you, do you kind of smile and try and hide it? Or do you go, oh my gosh, you're so generous? Yeah. People don't really understand the cost of construction in California right now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Gina. That was a great presentation.